In this video, we'll discuss project selection, approval, implementation, and closeout. When a disaster is declared and the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP, is authorized, it is incumbent on the applicant to solicit sub-applications from interested sub-applicants within its jurisdiction. The applicant then ranks the proposals based on the mitigation priorities identified in its hazard mitigation plan or priorities specific to the disaster declaration. If a proposal is selected by the applicant, the sub-applicant will have the opportunity to submit a full sub-application to the applicant. Both entities will work to further develop the sub-application and ensure its eligibility under HMGP and completeness as a project before submitting it to their respective FEMA regional office. The FEMA regional office will review the sub-application for eligibility and completeness, but also for feasibility and cost effectiveness and for environmental and historic preservation compliance. This process usually involves significant coordination with the applicant and indirectly the sub-applicant to guarantee compliance. If the sub-application meets the eligibility and completeness, feasibility and cost effectiveness, and environmental and historic preservation compliance requirements, then FEMA will award the project and obligate the approved funds to the recipient, previously the applicant, to designate to the subrecipient, previously the sub-applicant. Once funding is awarded, it is the responsibility of the recipient and subrecipient to carry out the projects to completion as effectively and efficiently as possible. Once the project is approved and funded, the recipient and subrecipient will need to be in frequent communication to coordinate project implementation. While every project's implementation will be different, the recipient and the subrecipient are responsible for ensuring that certain items are included during the project oversight and monitoring phase. These include the project follows the approved scope of work, budget, and timeline. Progress is tracked, recorded, and shared with FEMA through quarterly progress reports. It is up to the subrecipient and recipient to anticipate any issues, for example, cost overruns, delays, or needed scope of work modifications, and relay these issues to FEMA as soon as they can. The recipient and subrecipient may need to ask for time extensions, cost increases, or scope modifications, but it will be a much smoother process if FEMA is aware of any potential issues ahead of the time of the request. There may be environmental and historic preservation conditions or floodplain management requirements or other regulatory requirements that the recipient and or subrecipient is responsible for tracking and thereby ensuring proper processes are followed. The recipient must submit closeout requests to FEMA within 120 days of project completion. For closeout, the recipient is responsible for verifying the scope of work has been completed, verifying all costs were eligible, conducting final inspections, reconciling subrecipient expenditures, resolving negative audit findings, obtaining final reports from subrecipients, and reconciling closeout activities. There may be additional closeout or post-closeout requirements depending on the project type. For example, after acquisitions, the property must be deed restricted as open space. The local government must maintain the property as open space and may need to update their repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss list to reflect properties that have been mitigated. At minimum, the recipient's request for subaward closeouts should include the supporting documentation outlined in FEMA's HMGP closeout checklist to verify compliance with the award. This checklist can be found on FEMA.gov. Note that the time and costs incurred by the recipient and subrecipient to comply with closeout requirements can be considered under management costs because these are costs required to manage the grant. When considering reaching out for technical assistance, this flowchart should be followed. This will help prevent unnecessary communication issues between the different levels. A sub-applicant should first reach out to their state hazard mitigation officer, SHMO, or tribal emergency manager for questions or support. The SHMO or tribal representative can reach out to the appropriate FEMA region if they are unable to provide an adequate response. And the region can reach out to FEMA headquarters if any questions remain. Now let's recap what we've covered in this video. We gave a high-level overview of the sub-application development, selection, and approval process, including that FEMA will review projects for eligibility, completeness, cost-effectiveness, and technical feasibility. Then we covered some tips in implementation, including monitoring and quarterly reports. Then we reviewed the closeout process for both the recipient and what the FEMA Regional Office is responsible for. We wrapped up with a review of the process for accessing technical assistance. Here we've listed some resources that relate to the items discussed today and could be helpful to viewers. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments about the content covered here, please visit the HMGP webpage on FEMA.gov or reach out to FEMA-HMA webinars at FEMA.dhs.gov.